In a land where law came second to the gun, and love was rarer than rain, a runaway girl crossed paths with a lone cowboy, haunted by his past. She was running from a cruel fate, and he was riding toward redemption. When their worlds collided, hearts burned brighter than the desert sun. Could she trust him with her life and her heart?
Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got more powerful stories coming every single day, and you don't want to miss them. Now, let's begin.
Creek, spilling red light across the dust and dying grass. Inside the Cartwright home, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the sour scent of whiskey. Lila Mae Cartwright stood hidden by the kitchen doorway, her breath caught in her throat as she listened. Her stepfather, Harold Cartwright, sat hunched at the table, cards spread before him, and shame carved into every line of his face. Across from him lounged Vernon Tate, the richest and meanest rancher for 50 miles, a man whose smile never reached his eyes. "You owe me $600, Cartwright," Vernon said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "But I'm not without mercy. You've got something worth more than gold." Harold's voice trembled. "She's just a girl, Tate." Vernon leaned forward, his voice low and cruel. "She'll be a woman soon enough. I'll clear your debt, and you'll send her to my ranch by week's end. Do we have a deal?" The silence that followed shattered something deep inside Lila. She wanted to scream, to burst through the door and curse them both. Instead, she pressed her fist to her mouth, forcing the cry back down. Her heart pounded like thunder in her chest. Outside, the wind rose, rattling the window panes, as if the night itself were protesting. Lila turned and fled up the narrow stairs. By the time the last light faded, she was packing a worn carpet bag, her mother's locket tucked safely inside. Tomorrow she would ride. No matter the cost, she would not belong to Vernon Tate. Midnight draped Silver Creek in silence, the kind that makes every heartbeat sound too loud. Lila Mae Cartwright crept down the narrow stairs, clutching her carpet bag to her chest. The house was dark, except for the faint orange glow of a dying fire. Her stepfather's snores rumbled from the parlor, thick, heavy, and soaked in whiskey. She paused at the door, her trembling hand resting on the latch. For a moment, doubt clawed at her heart. Could she really survive out there, alone? The open desert was no place for a young woman, not with coyotes, outlaws, and men like Vernon Tate roaming free. But staying meant losing herself forever. Lila drew in a slow breath and pushed the door open. The cold air bit her cheeks as she slipped into the night. Her loyal mare, Clover, waited in the stable, her eyes glinting in the moonlight. Lila stroked her muzzle gently. "It's you and me now, girl," she whispered, her voice barely more than a tremor. She saddled Clover quickly, every creak of leather making her flinch. When she finally swung into the saddle, the fear melted into something sharper: resolve. She nudged Clover forward, the horse's hooves muffled against the soft earth as they rode past the edge of town. Behind her, the house grew smaller until it disappeared entirely. Ahead, the open plains stretched like a promise and a threat. Lila's eyes burned with unshed tears, but her spirit burned brighter. If you were Lila, would you stay and endure a life you never wanted, or risk everything for a chance at freedom? Tell us what your heart would choose. The first light of dawn stretched over the horizon, spilling gold across the endless plains. Lila Mae Cartwright had ridden through the night, guided only by the stars and the desperate beat of her own heart. By morning, exhaustion clung to her like dust. Clover's breathing grew labored, her steps slower with every mile. The land around them was merciless. Miles of brittle grass, scattered sage, and sun-baked rock. The air shimmered with heat even before noon. Lila shaded her eyes, searching for any sign of water or shelter. But the world stretched empty in every direction. Her canteen was nearly dry. She tilted it to her lips and caught the last drop on her tongue, the faint taste of metal and dust doing nothing to ease her thirst. Clover stumbled, and Lila quickly dismounted, patting the mare's neck. "Easy now, girl. We'll find water soon. We have to." But even as she said it, her voice cracked with doubt. The wind picked up, whispering across the barren land like a warning. She pulled her shawl tighter and kept walking beside Clover, one foot in front of the other, praying silently that the desert would show mercy. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, burning her skin and stealing her strength. When her legs finally gave out, she dropped to her knees beside Clover, her lips too dry for prayer. In that endless silence, Lila felt the first tremor of fear that she might never see another living soul again. She closed her eyes, whispering to the empty sky, "If you're listening, please send me a sign." When Lila awoke, the sun had slipped low, staining the horizon in copper and blood. Her lips were cracked, her throat raw. She blinked through the haze of heat and dust, thinking at first the shape before her was another mirage. But as it drew closer, she realized it was real. A rider cutting across the plain, horse sure-footed, coat worn, and hat pulled low against the dying light. Panic surged. She scrambled to her feet, fumbling for the small pistol hidden in her saddlebag. Her trembling hands barely managed to cock it. Clover stirred beside her, ears twitching as the stranger reined in a few yards away. "Easy there," the man said, voice rough as gravel, yet steady as a promise. "You look like you've been kissed by the sun one too many times." Lila didn't lower the gun. "I'm fine," she rasped. He dismounted slowly, his movements deliberate, unthreatening. "Name's Jack Rowland. You're miles from anywhere, miss. Ain't safe traveling alone out here." "I can take care of myself," she said, though her shaking knees betrayed her. Jack's gaze softened. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen, tossing it gently toward her. "Then start with a drink. You can argue after." The first swallow was salvation. The cool water burned down her dry throat, and tears pricked her eyes. When she looked up, Jack was already walking his horse toward the setting sun. "Water holes west of here," he called over his shoulder. "You'll make it easier with company." Lila hesitated, then mounted Clover and followed. Would you have trusted a stranger in the middle of nowhere? Or kept riding alone? By the time the sun sank completely, Lila Mae Cartwright and Jack Rowland reached the small spring nestled between two jagged rocks. The water glimmered beneath the first stars, a thin silver ribbon that looked like mercy itself. Lila dropped to her knees, cupping the cool water in her hands and drinking until her body stopped trembling. Clover lowered her head beside her, snorting softly as if relieved. Jack tended his horse in silence, his movements easy and deliberate. He gathered a few dry branches, built a fire, and handed Lila a strip of jerky. She accepted it hesitantly, her voice still rough. "Why help me?" she asked. "You don't even know who I am." He sat across from her, the firelight throwing shadows across his weathered face. Maybe I just don't like seeing people die slow when there's no need, he said simply. Lila studied him, the scars on his knuckles, the wear on his coat, the quiet strength in his voice. He seemed like a man who'd been alone too long, who carried ghosts he didn't talk about. "You're a long way from home," she said softly. "So are you," he replied, his eyes steady on hers. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, it was safe. For the first time since leaving Silver Creek, Lila felt something other than fear. She didn't trust him completely, not yet, but the fire between them burned with more than warmth. When she finally lay down beside Clover, sleep came easily. Somewhere nearby, Jack kept watch, his rifle across his knees, his eyes fixed on the stars. The morning broke cool and quiet, a pale haze stretching over the horizon. Lila Mae Cartwright woke to the smell of coffee and dust. Jack Rowland was already saddling his horse, his motions unhurried, practiced. She rubbed her eyes, still half lost in dreams of safety, a feeling she hadn't known in years. "Best get ready," Jack said, eyes on the trail. "We've got company." Lila froze. "Company?" He pointed to the ground, where faint hoofprints crisscrossed the sand, fresh and sharp. 3, maybe 4 riders. Passed not long before sunrise. Her stomach dropped. Vernon Tate's men. The name tasted like poison on her tongue. Jack's jaw tightened. "Figures as much. You didn't tell me you were running from a pack of wolves." "I didn't think you'd stay if you knew." Jack swung his rifle across his shoulder, his tone calm but resolute. "You're right. I wouldn't have stayed." He turned, met her eyes, and added quietly, "But I'd still ride with you." Lila didn't know what to say. Gratitude and fear tangled inside her chest. She mounted Clover, her pulse pounding as they started west, cutting across open plains where every sound carried for miles. The wind stirred dust behind them, too much dust. The riders weren't far. Jack glanced back once, then urged his horse faster. "We've got to keep ahead of them," he said, "and pray the desert favors the desperate." Lila clutched Clover's reins, heart hammering with dread and determination. If danger was closing in and you had one chance to fight or flee, which would you choose? By nightfall, the desert had swallowed the last trace of the riders' trail. Jack Rowland and Lila Mae Cartwright stopped near a dry riverbed, where the rocks offered a little shelter from the cold wind. Jack built a small fire, its glow flickering against his face, calm, watchful, unreadable. Lila sat across from him, hugging her knees. She hadn't spoken much since they'd seen the tracks that morning. Every time the wind rustled, she half expected to hear hoofbeats again. "You can rest easy," Jack said quietly. "We lost them for now." She looked into the flames. "For now," she repeated, her voice soft but bitter. "They'll keep coming." Jack stirred the fire with a stick. "Maybe, but you're tougher than you think." His tone caught her off guard. "You don't even know me," she said. He hesitated, then sighed. "Maybe not, but I know the look in your eyes. I've seen it in the mirror. Someone who's been trapped so long they've forgotten what freedom feels like." Lila's throat tightened. "You talk like a man who's lost everything." "I have," he admitted. "A war took my brothers, my land, and my peace. Been riding ever since, trying to outdistance ghosts." The fire popped, sending sparks into the dark. Lila's gaze softened. "I ran because my stepfather sold me to a man I could never love. Guess we're both running from something." For the first time, Jack smiled, faint but real. "Then Maybe it's time we stop running alone." The desert wind carried his words like a promise neither dared to name. Beneath the stars, two broken souls sat closer than before, bound by the quiet truth that pain recognized its own. The next day dawned, heavy with clouds. The air smelled of rain and gunpowder, a strange mix that made Lila Mae Cartwright's skin prickle. Jack Rowland rode ahead, scanning the ridges. His shoulders were tense, his hand never far from his rifle. They had crossed into a maze of sandstone canyons, beautiful but treacherous. Echoes played tricks on the ears, and even Clover's hoofbeats seemed to whisper of danger. "Storm's coming," Jack said, glancing at the sky. "We'll need to hole up before it breaks." Lila nodded, pulling her shawl tighter. "And if Tate's men find us first, then we make our stand." His tone was calm, but his eyes burned with quiet resolve. Thunder rolled across the canyon, deep and distant. Lila's heart thudded in time with it. She wanted to tell Jack how much his presence steadied her, how the fear didn't feel so sharp when he was near. But the words stayed trapped behind her lips. They found shelter beneath an overhang just as the first drops fell. Jack tethered the horses, while Lila gathered her courage to ask, "Why risk your life for me?" He paused, rain streaking his hat brim. "Because some people are worth fighting for," he said simply. "Do you believe courage is born from love or from fear? Tell us what drives you when the storm comes." The storm passed in the night, leaving behind a sky bruised with clouds and the sharp scent of wet dust. Lila Mae Cartwright stirred at the first light, her body aching, her heart uneasy. Jack Rowland was already awake, crouched near the fire, eyes fixed on the horizon. "They found us," he said quietly. In the distance, riders moved through the canyon mouth, 5 dark figures cutting across the pale dawn. Vernon Tate led them, his broad shoulders hunched, his face twisted in fury. Jack rose slowly, checking his revolvers. "Stay low," he ordered, "and don't run unless I tell you." Lila's pulse hammered as the riders closed in. The first gunshot cracked the morning silence, echoing like thunder off the canyon walls. Jack answered with one of his own, clean and quick. A man tumbled from his saddle. The battle was fast and brutal, smoke, dust, and the metallic taste of fear. Lila crouched behind a rock, clutching her father's old pistol, trembling so hard she could barely breathe. Then she saw Vernon Tate charge from behind a boulder, his shotgun aimed squarely at Jack. Without thinking, Lila stood and fired. The pistol kicked in her hands. Vernon's roar turned to a gasp as he stumbled backward into the dirt. Silence fell. The only sound was Clover's frightened snort and the wind sighing through the canyon. Lila stared at the smoking gun in her hands, realizing what she had done, and that she had just saved the man who'd saved her. Smoke hung heavy in the morning air. The gunfire had stopped, leaving only silence and the slow echo of wind through stone. Lila Mae Cartwright dropped the pistol, her hands shaking. Jack Rowland lay a few feet away, blood darkening his shirt. She ran to him, falling to her knees. "Jack, please!" Her voice broke as she pressed her hands against the wound. He caught her wrist, his grip weak but steady. "Easy, darling," he rasped. "Ain't the first bullet I've taken." Tears spilled down her dust-streaked cheeks. "You almost died for me." He managed a faint smile. "Didn't almost. You saved me." Lila's throat tightened. "You're the first man who ever looked at me like I was worth saving," she whispered, voice trembling. "You're my first kindness, my first reason to hope." Jack reached up, brushing a tear from her face with trembling fingers. "And you'll be my last," he said softly. "No more running. Not from this world. Not from you." For a moment, the desert seemed to hold its breath. Around them, dawn broke golden, warm against their faces. Lila leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his, her heart beating in time with his fading pulse. Alive, defiant, unbroken. If this moment touched your heart, share it with someone who believes love can still be found in the wildest places. The sun climbed higher, spilling gold over the canyon's edge. Lila Mae Cartwright sat beside Jack Rowland, who had drifted into uneasy sleep. His breathing was shallow, but steady. She cleaned the blood from his wound with trembling hands, using the last of their water. Not far away lay the bodies of Vernon Tate and his men, silent now, their dust settling into the desert that had swallowed countless souls before them. Lila rose slowly, her legs weak, and gathered stones. With quiet determination, she built a cairn over Tate's grave. No name, no mercy, just silence. When she returned, Jack's eyes flickered open. "You should have left me," he murmured. "I couldn't," she said simply. "You're all I have left." A faint smile ghosted across his lips. "Then I reckon I'd better keep breathing." Lila laughed softly, the sound breaking through the grief like sunlight through clouds. She helped him sit up, wrapping his coat tighter around him. "We'll head west," she said. "Find a town that doesn't know our names." Jack nodded. "Start over?" "Together," she whispered. The wind carried away the smell of smoke and blood, leaving only the scent of sage and freedom. The worst was behind them, but the road ahead was theirs to claim. By the time the next dawn touched the desert, the world felt new. A faint mist clung to the sand, glowing pale gold beneath the rising sun. Lila Mae Cartwright saddled Clover, her hands steady now, her fear burned away. Beside her, Jack Rowland moved slowly, his shoulders still bandaged, but his spirit unbroken. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythm of the horses' hooves soft against the earth. The canyons behind them faded into distance, a graveyard for the past. Ahead stretched open sky, endless and bright. Lila glanced over at Jack. "You ever think about where you'll stop?" He smiled faintly beneath his hat. "Ain't found the place yet. Maybe it ain't on any map." "Then we'll find it together," she said, voice sure for the first time. Jack reached across the space between them, his rough hand brushing hers. "Reckon I'm done drifting," he murmured. The sun climbed higher, warming their faces. Lila looked west, toward the unknown, toward hope. For the first time in her life, the road ahead didn't scare her. It called to her. As they rode on, the wind carried the faint echo of her laughter across the plains. She was his reason to stop wandering, and he was her reason to start living. Months later, in a quiet valley far from Silver Creek, a small cabin stood beneath the whispering pines. Lila Mae Cartwright tended the garden, while Jack Rowland mended a fence nearby, his laughter echoing through the open air. They had found peace, not in riches or revenge, but in the simple grace of each new morning. The ghosts of the past had faded with the dust behind them, and when the wind swept across the valley at sunset, it carried a promise made beneath the desert sky. She was his first hope, and he was her last home.
Thank you for watching till the end. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. We'll be dropping brand new powerful stories every single day. See you on the next one.